Let's do it on the cloud. All right. Well, hello and welcome. My name is Robert Wolf. I'm an asset coach and a tax strategist. The goal for this podcast is to help define what an asset coach and a tax strategist does by bringing various guests and partners of mine that have helped me to bring out the most of what my business owners are looking for. And what my business owners are looking for are cash flow. And so if you're like all the other business owners I work with, that's the big question. How do I increase cash flow? And so with that on your mind and every other business owners, what I want to do is just be able to share the various ways that we can do this, but not necessarily by selling more product or services, but actually providing the value that you as a business owner are seeking for. And sometimes you don't even know what to seek out. And so really that's what this podcast is about, is trying to create things that you should probably thinking about, tools that are out there that will help you increase that cash flow, which is the number one in the lifeblood of your business. And so we're going to start this off with our guest today. Our guest today is Brian Evans. So I'm going to give a quick little brief intro of who Brian is, and then we'll start our interview here. So Brian Evans is a certified business coach with clients throughout the United States and even beyond the United States. He coaches other leaders, as well as business owners, executives, and really his goal is to solve the essential problems and create dynamic growth. So the key there is dynamic growth, right? As a coach, for more than 15 years, Brian has been blessed to advise clients from various situations, such like hockey players, worldwide best-selling authors and speakers, C-suite executives, board members of national organizations, startup entrepreneurs, YouTube celebrities, which is probably 15 years ago when you started, Brian, that was not a thing, sole proprietors, terrorism experts, Mary Kay reps, even rocket scientists, imagine that. And then also NFL and NCAA athletes. And then I'm on that list as well. Brian is actually my personal business coach. So I am bringing education to this podcast of people that I use as well and that have helped me. So let's go ahead and get started with our interview. And the first question, Brian, I'm going to ask you is, I speak to a lot of people, and some of them know about coaching. Some of them don't. It's foreign to them, other than maybe some kind of sport that an activity they did when they were a kid. So tell me, as a coach, what do you do and how do you help people?
Well, thanks for asking, Bob, and thank you for having me on the podcast. It's a great question because you hit one of the nails on the head, which is when I say I'm a coach, a lot of people say, oh, great, what sport do you coach? And I used to get sort of annoyed. No, you don't understand. There's a whole realm of coaching that's out there. And you as an asset coach, you know that, that's going to be the starting point of the conversation. But over time, what I realized is that there's a lot of wisdom in people having that one frame of reference. Okay, well, I've had a sports coach, and that coach taught me how to practice, taught me how to work hard, helped me to see where my growth areas were, helped me to provide some practices so that I could increase my skill, and ultimately help me to become better at my sport. Well, that's not that different from what coaches do, what I do as a professional coach. There's three basic questions that I ask every client, and we continuously work through this. Where are you now? Where are you going? What's in the way? And this is, I've learned it's simple, but it's really, really powerful, Bob, because everyone has a sense of where they are. Now, they may be kind of not quite ready or willing to look at where they are right now, but they have a sense of where they are right now. And they have an idea of where they want to go. Maybe not so specific that they can articulate it, but that's where you and I both can help people to get clear on what that vision is. And then there's always something in the way. And how do I know there's always something in the way? Well, if there wasn't something in the way, they'd already be where they wanted to go.
Yeah.
So that's the growth part that you mentioned earlier is, okay, you have a vision for what that growth looks like, but there are things in the way. Let's work together to resolve those so that you can incrementally move from where you are to where you want to go. So that's what I do as a coach.
Yeah, that's great. And it's so true. It's funny. There's a lot of similarities to obviously what we both do as coaches. I happen to do it from an asset perspective, and you do it from a human aspect perspective. But the reality is, from both situations, we're dealing with a human, and the starting point is, yeah, where are you? Right? We have to figure out what a baseline looks like. So you know how to grow, right? So we've been working together for a couple of years now, and you have an idea of what my baseline was and where I'm at now, and you have to have something that grades the success. If to a sports analogy, right? If I'm a baseball player and I keep striking out and I can't hit the ball, well, my grade is it's an F, right? So I got to figure out techniques to be able to hit that ball. So when we're little kids in T-ball, that's what we're doing. We're putting a ball on a tee. We're learning how to swing, and we're making things simple. And so I think that's great. So I guess the exciting part about this whole thing, Brian, is what inspired you to want to become a coach?
Well, it's an interesting question, Bob, because my becoming a coach, I was actually inspired out of my own failures. So I'll tell you a story. Before I turned 30, I was an executive in a nonprofit organization. I had been named one of the executives, a C-suite executive, and I was being groomed to become the president of this organization. But what I didn't have was any real clear sense on how to actually do the job that I was being groomed for. And so I just started working harder and harder and harder, but I wasn't really getting forward. And over time, I started to burn out and my work started to suffer. And eventually I was actually fired as the executive. So I went in 18 months from we're grooming you to be the president to thank you very much for your service, but it's time for us to part ways. And it really kind of shook me because I thought to myself, well, what could I have done differently? And as a bridge job, I went to work for Franklin Covey. And this was where one of the biggest gifts came into my life, Bob, because I got the chance to meet Stephen Covey and to hear from him what would make the difference. And the difference, the thing that would have made a difference was executive coaching. Now, prior to that point, as we've discussed, my only frame of reference was, okay, here's football coaching, here's basketball coaching. But then someone said, no, there's actually a field where there are individuals that have the ability to help you see things differently and help you move things through differently. And I didn't know that that existed back then. Had I known that, and had my company known that, and they had hired a coach to help me to move from where we wanted to go as an organization, from where we were to where we wanted to go, then quite possibly I would have been more successful in that. Yeah. So my becoming a coach came out of my failure, but what I've done is I've learned that when I learned that what would have made a difference was to have a coach, I realized that it was a perfect match for my gift set, and that I could help other organizations, other individuals, not have to let go of promising individuals, intelligent individuals, capable individuals, passionate individuals who simply didn't know how to move through those obstacles. And so that's what I set my life to do, to help people to move through their obstacles.
Yeah, that's fantastic. This is one of the reasons why I love sports so much, especially for kids, because it really gives us as adults a foundation of how to guide and direct our kids, or just kids in general, even if they're not your kids, to what life is going to be like. But here's the irony of this whole thing, Brian, that I always found very interesting, is that when we leave college or whatever upper level education, and we leave the sports and we leave all the things that we used to use so many times as a kid or as we were younger, we all of a sudden stop using mentors, we stop using coaches, but we're expecting to excel and succeed in what we're doing. But how can we possibly do that if we have no one that's holding us accountable in a good and a bad way, right? I mean, there's times where, you know what, I just suck, right? And I need someone to say, look, Bob, this is how you need to change it. Now, Brian, to this point, Brian has never told me I suck, but no. he does it much more eloquently though than just saying that. I'm a blunt person, so that's how I hear things. But even if you're somebody who wants to build your spirituality, You need to have a spiritual director, someone to guide you and go down the pathway. And even today, we can look at the coaching and professional athletes, right? How many times have we heard in the past Tiger Woods changed his own coach? A swing coach, right? The guy was at the peak of the number one earner for however many years, and he's switching coaches because he needs to switch his swing. You can look at every athlete, whether it's baseball, hockey, football, you name it. And then the interesting thing is that when you start looking at people who are extremely successful, and this is, I think, where some of the separation comes into play as we start leaving the comfort of our parents' house or the college or the comfort environment that we're in, and now we're out on our own. I think we start becoming less educated about our own needs and how we need to succeed. And we think we're caring for our own needs by making certain decisions, and a lot of times very selfish, but someone can be extremely selfish because they want themselves to excel and succeed. And I see a lot of times, in my world, when I talk to people, not just clients, but other advisors, and I ask them, look, I know you're struggling. We've had some conversations, and do you use a coach? Oh, no, I'm not going to spend my money on that. Right. Well, you're seeing the results of that. So congratulations. You now know what the results of that are. And so I find this great. So I guess that leads to the next big question here, Brian, is do you personally use a coach, and why do you personally use a coach?
Well, absolutely, I do. I've had a coach for many years, actually coaches for many years. I have two coaches that I work with on a weekly basis that I've worked with for about 2.5 years. But even prior to that, I've had peer coaches that I've worked with, some of them for, there's one I've been working with for about 12 years, and we get on a call every 2 weeks for 12 years. And so that brings up really two distinctions. Number one, it's not about one particular viewpoint, either my viewpoint or your viewpoint, Bob. It helps to have someone else's viewpoint to help us circumstances that we're in through a different lens. I refer to it as kaleidoscopic. If you have a kaleidoscope, and maybe some of your clients and listeners to this podcast know what a kaleidoscope is. If you don't, Google it. But when we look through the lens of a kaleidoscope, it's a beautiful picture because of the glass pieces and the light. But if we turn it just a little bit, nothing has changed in terms, we haven't added anything, but it's an entirely different view. And the same is true in my life, my business, your business, everyone's life and businesses. We get so accustomed to looking at one view and saying, oh, that's what the view is, that having someone go, look, let's just turn it a little bit and look at it a little bit differently. All of a sudden, we see new possibilities. We see things through very different eyes. And that, I think, is really one of the most critical things that I've found empowering for me about having a coach. And the reason why I have I'll tell you, I have an army of coaches, Bob. Like I said, I have my two primary coaches who I pay and who I invest in my own growth and invest in helping me see my life and my business differently. And then I probably have six peer coaches. These are other high-level coaches that I've made contact with over the years, who I have conversations with on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and we support each other to keep our continued growth going. I think that you can never underestimate the power of having support, and also having accountability, and having someone who can ask the question, can you look at that a little bit differently? And just to finish that point, going back to your sports analogy, we talked about how, if you're striking out all the time, you're a D or an F in terms of your performance. And yet you look at, Hall of Famers, they're 300 hitters. Mm-hmm. That means 7 out of every 10 times they did not succeed, but someone helped them to say, look, if you can hit 350, my goodness, you'll be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
with enough longevity and with a long enough track record of success. And yet 6.5 to 7 times out of 10, you're going to fail at your intention, which is to hit the ball.
Yeah.
That's the power of that's the power of coaching, to help us to recognize what do we need to do to succeed. Now, in your case, Bob, you're working with your clients. What's your financial vision? How do you want to grow your assets? How do you want to minimize your tax burden? And you will help them to recognize that there are strategies out there that can help them to do that. Whereas many just come in and say, that's just the way that is, or this is, I guess, going to work out okay.
Yeah.
Coaching moves it from speculative to performance-based.
Yeah, that's so true. It's interesting that you say that, because it's kind of funny. We speak every 2 weeks very regularly, and I don't think we've ever missed over the last 2 years. We may have adjusted the time of the same day, but we have not missed. And the interesting thing that I see that occurs right about the day or two before we're jumping on the phone to go over our coaching. Those are a lot of times the times that I feel like, boy, things are really going rough. I am so glad that I'm talking to Brian in a couple of days. And there's been a couple times, where I've sent you a text message or just called you and said, look, I'm struggling right now, and here's what I'm struggling with. And we've had conversations, and it's not like I'm on the roof ready to jump or anything like that, but it's just sometimes we need an adjustment in our minds and our mind shift in how we need to look at things. I used to teach my son's youth soccer when he was younger. And nobody wants to be a goalie in youth soccer, right? And the interesting thing is everyone wants to score goals. And so I found this one kid who wasn't very athletically prone to be able to be on the field other than at goalie. And he kind of was a little fearless. He was one of those kids, he didn't know what he didn't know, right. Which was an asset. That was his asset. And we started working on some shooting drills, and he was getting really frustrated because all these balls were flying by him. And so I stopped everybody, and I said, you guys go get a water. And so I talked to him. Let's just say his name's Jimmy. And I said, Jimmy, turn around and look at the goal. And so he turns around, looks at the goal, and I said, what do you see? He's like, well, I see through the net. I said, yeah, but what did you just say? What word did you just say? Net. I said, now look at how big this goal is, and look at your size. Is this goal bigger than you? Well, yeah. And there's a net there, right? Yeah. So what do you think this goal is designed to do? When people kick the ball, what's it supposed to do? Stop balls? I said, yeah, that's why there's a net. So are you set up for success right off the bat by just looking at the goal? And he's like, no, I don't think I am, because I'm little. I'm like, exactly. I said, the ball is supposed to go in. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at it every time you stop a ball. I want you to give yourself a point, that you scored a point by stopping that ball. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, this kid was like diving left and right, and he became an animal back there. And yes, there's still balls that went in the goal, but the mindset in his mind was that it wasn't this huge thing anymore. It was like, he's right, and I can now score myself on how good I'm doing. And that made my rest of my team who were taking shots better, because they had to take better shots. Right. And so by the individual's mindset changing, it affected the entire team's performance. And so it's just, that's to the point of what you've done for me, is that when you're shifting my mind a little bit to where it needs to be adjusted to, then that next time I meet with that next client, I am that much better and that much more effective. And that client, whether they know it or not, are being rewarded by that conversation we just had and that little switch in my head.
Well, that's a brilliant analogy, Bob. And it's you asked earlier, or you mentioned earlier, about how when we come out of our college years and then there's sort of this presumption that we're going to know how to do things, even though we don't often have the mentorship or the guidance to do that. And I think what happens is there's two things that happen when we're in our school ages. Number one, we are either taught or we intuit that somehow struggle equals failure. that if I'm struggling, then I'm failing. And so I don't want to fail, and so I don't want to struggle. So if I'm struggling, I must be failing, and so it becomes sort of a very personalized failure. And yet,
so true.
One of the successful people that you and I have talked about, and that many of your viewers and listeners will know about, have failed frequently. And so what the difference is the mindset of seeing struggle as part of the process. I mean, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the fact that, we struggled to walk. Every single person who was ambulatory struggled to walk, but it didn't mean that they failed. It simply meant that was part of the growing process. That was part of the sense that, okay, I fall, I get down. Okay, that's what balance feels like. That's what strength feels like. This is what my need to lean on something for support looks like. And yet we sort of forget that as adults, and we all of a sudden buy into the Superman ethos that, well, I can succeed at everything and I must succeed at everything, otherwise I am a failure. And I think that that's the second part that comes out of our school years, is that this unlivable belief that you must succeed at everything first time out, better than anybody has ever done it in the history of mankind. Otherwise, there's something particularly wrong with you. And we're not prone to look for coaches, because there's an admission in that, maybe I can't do this, or I don't know how to do it, and I don't want to be perceived as that. So when you ask your advisors, do you have a coach? And they say, no, it's not about the money. It's not about the time. It's about an internal belief that says, yes, but if I ask for help, somehow I failed or I'm weak. And that's and that is the same with the clients that come to you. If I'm somehow admitting that I don't know how to grow my assets and I don't know how to manage my tax obligation, but you wouldn't know how to do that. There's no reasonable expectation that you would know how to do that. So why not? I don't know how, if or someone I know has to have surgery, I don't know how to perform surgery on myself, but there's no reasonable expectation that I would, so I go see a surgeon.
Right. That's so true. And it's funny how we throw these perceptions out there on ourselves. And, I heard years ago, I'm Catholic, and my wife and I have been fairly involved in our Catholic faith, not necessarily from a church perspective, but also as an individual. And so we both have spiritual directors, and we were attending this conference years ago. And one of the things that, the student, what's the saying, that the student shows up, or the teacher shows up when the student is open, or
when the student is ready, the master or the teacher shows up when the student is ready.
Exactly. And so we're at a conference, and that happened. The guy that was talking up there, he was saying, look, and it was about prayer. The topic was about prayer. I said, look, prayer is supposed to be hard, because you're admitting every time you sit there and pray that you are not able to do something. And sometimes you feel like you're asking and asking and asking, but that's what you're supposed to do. We're social beings. You're supposed to ask the person next to you to help you when you need help.
Right.
And it just was boom. It blew my mind. I was like, that is so true. And when you hear people that are put in solitude or they're by themselves, they go crazy. Right? So we are social. So we need this dynamic. We need this relationship. Put the money aside. It's just the physicality of being next to people and having the sense awareness that we're next to each other. So let's talk about more of what are some of your successes that you've had with your clients. Give us a case study or two, or some. Obviously, I protect the names of the innocent.
Yes, sure. And I've been blessed over these 15 years to really work with a lot of different people. Obviously, you shared, and all of the people who you mentioned in the introduction are true, including the rocket scientists. I used to work at a research organization, and so I've had astrophysicists as clients, and I've had a hockey player, an international hockey player as client, the NFL players, and others. And so before I share about case studies, I think what is relevant to recognize, and may be relevant for your viewers and listeners as well, is the fact that I don't coach industries. I coach individuals. Like you said earlier, we both coach human beings because human beings are doing whatever they're doing, whether it's a rocket scientist or a hockey player or a YouTube personality. I know nothing about YouTube personalities. I freely admit it. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But what I do understand is human nature, and what I work with individuals on is human nature. So, I think some of the more rewarding conversations and clients that I've had, some of them are those who have been struggling to do something different. So they are emerging from a W-2 world, which was the world that their parents created for them and said, you go to school, you get good grades, you get the good job with benefits, and they are miserable in whatever they're doing. And so to be able to support them in having the courage to design a life that they want, to help them see, oh, okay, here's where you are now. You're miserable in the work that you're doing. Here's where you want to go. I want to feel a sense of freedom and fulfillment and financial wherewithal and take care of my family and not die from stress doing it. And the thing that was in the way was this perception that there is only one way to be in our society, and that is to be an employee. So I have an individual, Joe. That's actually Joe's real name, but that's it. But he doesn't mind. He loves me to tell the story. And I had known Joe for many years, and he was a leader in the telecom industry. And then but he went through a series of layoffs, and Joe was in his late 40s, early 50s as he was going through this. And so he was finding it more and more difficult because of age biases to get jobs. And so we sat in a Panera restaurant in Denver in 2014. And I sat with him and said, Joe, what do you really want? And we went back and forth and back and forth. And by the end of our time together, Joe had decided, okay, I'm going to build something now. I'm going to use all of the skill that I have as a high-level sales individual, and I'm going to create a sales consulting and coaching firm. Fast forward now, I talked to Joe last week. I have him on the calendar for next week. He's one of my guys that I speak to every 2 weeks. And Joe, 5 years later, he continuously thanks me because he has the time and financial freedom that he always wanted. He has the fulfillment of working with companies and with individuals utilizing his gifts. And he has created the life that he could see in the distance. So many of us window shop our life. Oh, that's a really wonderful dress or suit I see in the window, but it's on the other side of that window. Wow, I bet that would be really cool to wear that. And then we walk down the street and we never actually go in and try on the suit and to find that it's a perfect fit. He was window shopping his life, and he shared this with me about 4 weeks ago. He said, I can't thank you enough because I just came back from being in the Bahamas, where I didn't have to ask anybody's permission to go, where I had time with my wife and I had time with good friends, and I conducted business while I was there, and I've established my ability to really be in the space where I wanted to be able to do my work that I love, but to do it in a way that makes sense for me and allows me to be fulfilled. It's a great, great experience for me as a coach to hear someone who is happy having made that leap of faith. Now, was it easy? No, absolutely not. I mean, and I know, and many of your viewers know who have built their own businesses, whether that business is called, Microsoft, or whether that business is called retirement. Because if you're going into retirement, that's the business of you, Inc. And you're managing assets, you're managing struggles, you're managing your own internal fears and concerns. And Bob, you see this every day. So it's not only the people who are in the suit and the high rise that are managing their business assets that way. It's also the teachers who have accumulated wealth and are in retirement age and are saying, am I going to have the confidence to have this last me for my life? So that's some of the clients you work with. But my favorite client story to tell. So here's the startup. But my favorite story to tell is I coached the Crown Prince of a Middle Eastern kingdom.
Whoa.
I had a unique opportunity when I was working at a research institution to meet the Crown Prince of the Middle Eastern kingdom. And I told him that I coach individuals. And he said, well, what would you think about this? And what he wanted to do was he wanted to create social equity programming for women in his country. Great. That's the where do you want to go? But where we are right now is in my country, as part of the culture, women are seen as second-class citizens. They are totally, garbed from head to toe. They don't receive very formalized education beyond basic education. And what's in the way is this is rooted in over 1,000 years of Sharia law. How do I do that? Well, that was an interesting moment, Bob, because I sat there going, I don't know, how do I do this? And I'm like, wait a minute, this is an individual. This is an individual with near infinite resources. But this is an individual just like the guy who is laid off and trying to find a new job. Where are you now? Where are you going? What's in the way? Okay, how can you see this differently? And so that's the work that I do. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavor of it matters, but it doesn't matter what the appearance of the circumstances are. We can all use help moving from where we are to where we're going, and help in shifting our perspective so that we can move through the things that are in our way.
Well, and that's true, because, in Joe's case, how difficult a question was it to find out, well, Joe, what do you want to do? Mm-hmm. Right? But it's such a simple question, but oh my goodness, such a difficult answer, right? And I think a lot of us can say exactly what we want. Mm-hmm. But like you said, it's the journey. So, okay, I want this, and I can answer it right away. Okay, now we get all caught up in all the other stuff. And that's where you come in and say, okay, time out. Let's just keep this. Let's keep what you said, what you wanted in our forefront. Right. That's your target. And we're going to work together with every little thing that you're going to run into to help you get there. But you got to really want this. Simon Sinek calls it, what's your why, right? In his book, and start with why, and understanding why are you going to do something. And so I find that very good. So now, how do you establish or even measure a client's success? When it comes to money, it's either higher or lower. When it comes to a building, it's either there or it's not. How do you measure that with coaching?
Well, usually we spend some time up front getting a clear sense of what's important and how do we measure it. Now, sometimes it's easy. When with a lot of the business business coaching clients, you can start with the easy measurable, standards. Okay, I'm at X revenue and I want to be at a different level of revenue, and so that's what we work towards. But there's always two layers to that, Bob. There's always there's the measurable, but then there's the growth of the individual that's required for them to reach their goal. And that's the part that is equally important, but a little bit more difficult to measure. But usually, we can set up standards of measurement and benchmarks and things like that. And you and I talk about, on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, okay, where are we in regards to the plan that laid out, and recognize that despite all of those measurables, there's all of the growth that's going to go along with it. And sometimes the growth comes through, through success, and sometimes the growth comes through quote unquote failure or struggle, because that helps to refine, all right, well, this is an avenue that I was going down that I don't really think is going to be the avenue to take me there, and so I'm going to have to readjust my expectations. But frequently, I'll sit down with my clients when they start and say, okay, what are the clear measurable goals that we want to set out with? What are the benchmarks? What are the rating scales that we're looking? Where are you in terms of your current level of satisfaction with some measurable sense? And then a while later, we take a look and say, okay, has that improved? Has that not improved? What changes do we need to make? And it's very similar to when you're coaching individuals, and that, okay, we might need to refine that strategy. We might need to change that strategy altogether. The same is true when we're coaching individuals. It's just, there is no straight line growth. There is no straight line growth. So it's a constant interaction. I kind of think of it as a dialogue, or frequently what I tell my clients is basically when we're on the phone with each other or on Zoom, it's a tango. I'm going to start with a very simple question like, so, Bob, how are you doing today? And then we'll see where we go over the next 60 to 90 minutes. And at the end, we're kind of like, oh, I guess that's where we were going to go. That's the living organism of what you do and what I do. Is there, if it was a mathematical equation, it would be very easy to do it, and neither of us would be doing the work that we're doing. It's a human equation, which is a constant, sort of collection of thoughts and feelings and ideas and biases and fears and judgments, and then we're overlaying that onto the performance of their assets and or the performance of whatever it is that we're measuring. And that's where you and I get to help people in such a deep, deep way, because we are human organisms that are not mechanical, and the human organism is the one that is in the decision making process and who ultimately is moving from where they are to where they want to go.
Yeah, that's so true. My wife and her sister have the saying, when things go tough, just be a leaf in a river. Yeah. The water is going to flow, and I'm just a leaf. I'm going with it. I have really given up the power of dictating the direction that this is going to happen. So it's interesting. It's funny because from my standpoint, when I'm working with clients, because I'm working with business owners just like you are, but I find that when I work with business owners, a lot of times they make a lot of decisions with their individual hat, their employee hat. They don't necessarily look at things how from a business owner would look at things, or vice versa, right? And it's a real struggle for a business owner, because sometimes you just got to step back and kind of play this role of, okay, I'm a business owner, I got to make these decisions. Oh, I'm an individual, I'm an employee, I got to make these decisions. And so, like, when we're talking about their assets and their money and taxes, I always find myself going, well, that's an employee mindset.
Right.
You're a business owner. We need to look at this from a business owner's perspective, and here's how the IRS talks about that. And it's just that little mind shift, but if there's not somebody to acknowledge that there's a difference, how would we ever know?
It's true.
And
it's true. I mean, think about it, Bob. I mean, from our world of entertainment and sports, how many actors say, okay, I'm going to become a director, or athletes after their playing days are over say, I'm going to become a coach. And just because you've been in a game doesn't mean that that's you're going to become an exceptional coach, as from moving from player to coach. Learning, growing, mentoring, the ones that have gone then become assistant coaches, became coordinators, things like that. Those are the ones that set themselves up for success. Well, the same is true for so many of us who have gone from a W-2 to an entrepreneurial endeavor. We just sort of made a leap. I know that was the case for me. I just made a leap. Did I make it? Was a difficult thing along the way, but thankfully I had people who could coach me through that process.
That's right. Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. So let me talk to the viewers about my experience with Brian and with yourself. And so people kind of get an idea and understanding of this relationship and maybe a little bit of vulnerable. Now, obviously, we're not going to shed tears here. We're not going into those stories, right? We're going to leave.
Okay.
But so for me, so this December will be 4 years I've been out on my own. And so, when, like you, just I'm jumping out of the nest, right? And I'm going to land on 2 feet. And going through this process, you're making decisions, you're doing what you can. And at first it is survival, right? I mean, it is, I know I need to do something. I know I have something that's of value that people need to hear and listen and really need. So for me, what's been great about working with you is that, we'll talk about goals. We've listed out our goals, and we go through and talk about those goals. And a lot of times as a business owner, they tend to be, how many customers or clients or revenue, right? But at the same time, there's got to be some personal goals in there. For example, one of my goals was to write a book, right? You remember that? That was on my 2018 goal. And we got the end of 2018 and was like, I didn't do that. But then I looked at that and I said, darn it, but I have something to say now. And when I was a long time ago, years ago, I always said, that'd be kind of neat to write a book. But what do I have to say that somebody would want to read, right? And so now we're fast forward to now, and I just got published my first book, and called Economic Termites, and that probably would not have happened in the time frame that it did if I was left on my own, just doing my own thing. In fact, I'd probably be working at the post office. Nothing against the post office, but you get my point. I probably wouldn't be in a entrepreneurial spirit, though that spirit is always there, but that role is a lot different than spirit. And so for me, that, I could check that off the box. When was my goal to have that book written? I just looked at my goals, Brian. It was 6/30/2019. How crazy is that? So did I hit my goal? I did. Did I hit in June 30th, 2019? Yes. It's within the year, right? But it was dead. Check it off. That's awesome, right? So from my standpoint, and if I would look at how I've been able to deliver services and resources, and how I've been able to help clients, I never went by asset coach and tax strategist. This was something that came when a coach asked Bob, just tell me what you do. When you're with a client, just tell me what you do. I don't want to know numbers and the process and the how. Just tell me who are you? What do you call yourself? And I'm like, that's a heavy question, right? And so I help people with their assets, and we develop tax strategies. So I went through this whole process, and all of a sudden I'm like, boom, eureka! I'm an asset coach and I'm a tax strategist. And immediately I started branding asset coach and tax strategist, because that was more definable when people ask me what I do than saying a business consultant.
Correct.
What is that? What does that mean? But an asset coach and a tax strategist is very specific on what I do and how. Now, how I do it, right, it can go a bunch of different ways. But from my perspective, when I'm grading and looking at my measurables, this year, 2019, is beyond last year. 2018 was beyond 2017. And so for me, those are measurables. Those are things that I measure myself on and and it's not necessarily measurables of how many clients or how much revenue or X, Y, and Z. It's, am I doing things to cause my business to move forward? And if I am not, then I'm doing something wrong, because the clients and the revenue are rewards for your mental toughness of getting out there and battling the world and trying to help people that may or may not know they need help. Right. And so that's tough. And we're both kind of in the same boat when it comes to that, because, I happen to work on the asset and the money side of things and taxes and that sort of stuff. But I would argue that your mindset and people that you're working with is probably even harder, because you're dealing with their mind, right? It is all between the ears. You're not teaching them how to dial a phone number. Right. They already know how to do that, right? It's why do you need to pick up the phone? Why do you need to dial that number, right? And it's that, to me, that's what you've been able to do is flip the switch, and it doesn't need to be like the rotary phone where you go.
Hopefully your viewers remember the rotary phone. but you and I
That's right. That's right. Well, for those who have no idea what I just said, it literally was a rotary number.
Just Google rotary phone. You'll get a sense.
Exactly. But for me, it was like a dial where you just almost like a gas stove, right? Or any kind of dial where you just one notch. That's it. Just one notch. And then once we're good with that notch, another notch. So for me, it's been very, very beneficial, and I have received a lot of benefits from it. But more importantly, my clients have received the benefit of it. Because again, if I'm not here building my business, I'm an employee somewhere else, not helping the people who are seeking help, who are seeking the advice that they don't know that's out there, that someone actually can provide it. So Brian is, for all the viewers, Brian's not just helping each individual, but it expands beyond that from a social aspect of a community, and it's very powerful. So,
well, thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And so let's talk about the use of a coach. We have a few more minutes left, and let's just talk about the use of a coach. And so in my business, 10 years, probably 10 years ago, it was a suit and tie. And then the jacket got tossed and it was just a tie, or the tie got tossed and it was just the jacket. But now with the internet, and you have all these billionaire entrepreneurs showing up in shorts and a t-shirt doing, these shareholder meetings with these multi-million-dollar investors and billionaire investors, and you got the CEO sitting there in shorts and a t-shirt.
Exactly right.
And so there's a certain mindset that people have of what somebody needs to be like in order to have a coach, or in order to participate in a particular service. So what sort of person hires you as a coach?
Well, good question. And we touched on it a little bit already in terms of sort of the variety of clients who I have coached. But I think the people who do hire the coach are the ones who recognize and have begun to sort of shift that view of, if I ask for help, then I'm actually receiving what I want and what I need in order to help myself and therefore help my clients. You talked about, the ripple effect of me working with you is that it helps the clients, and so that ripples out into our communities. So the ones who have learned or recognized, and actually I'm going to counter that, the ones who have unlearned the social programming that you are the self-made man and you can do it on your own and just put your nose to the grindstone, and instead, going back to something you said earlier, the recognition that we are social animals, that we grew up in social pods and tribes, and there was the gathering and the utilization of different viewpoints within the tribe to make the tribe stronger. You're just at the center of the tribe when you say, I need someone to help me see things differently, to see possibilities differently. If I had one word that would encapsulate the value of a coach, it is possibilities. Because a coach can hold the vision for possibilities for their client until their client can begin to see it and draw evidence for it themselves. That's what I do most frequently. So who hires a coach? Someone who recognizes that they have something that they want to attain, or they're somewhere where they are right now and there's somewhere else that they want to be, and they're not sure how to create that possibility, or if that possibility is even real in a lot of cases. So that's about the mindset of the coach. The application of what they're doing, I have a photographer, I have a singer, I have a dentist, I have a surgeon, that's all a reflection of the willingness to recognize that there's something more that I'm capable of doing, having, or being, and I don't know how to get there, but maybe there's someone who can help me to support me so that until I can begin to really clearly see what that is and how to get there. That's what I do as a coach, and those are the people who come to me for coaching. Coachability is the key. If you're willing to be coachable, fortunately, Bob, you are. If you're willing to take responsibility, you spoke earlier about commitment, to have the commitment to take action even when the fears come up. to trust in the coach, that the coach has your best interest at heart, and then to recognize that things are not always going to go smoothly. It's like birth. For anyone whose family member has given birth or they've given birth themselves, it is a ugly, messy, painful process, but you get this amazing gift on the other side of it.
Yeah.
All of coaching is generally like that. It's not a straight line. It is generally messy, but if you have this amazing gift on the other side of it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, coachability is the interesting part of it. I have a particular client that I'm working with right now, and they paid me to put together a tax plan for them. They're getting ready to retire, right? And so I'm reviewing their assets, and we've had a few meetings together. And after our last meeting, I get this email that basically said what he wanted me to deliver to him as a result for him as a plan. And I sat there and I read this, and I'm like, why'd you pay me money if you already know what you want to do? Mm-hmm. And it was interesting. And I'm like, well, he hired me. I hire you to tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And so I think the coachability aspect and the accountability to be able to be present and suck it up sometimes. Sometimes you need to take a jab, right? I'm sure people here have met somebody that they go, that guy just needs to get punched in the nose. Right? But of course, we're not going to be the guy that's going to do that, but there's some, right, metaphorically, but there's some people you just see there and go, boy, that guy will crumble, he'll change, all he just needs is one of those. And I'm not saying that's what my client needs by any means, but I'm just saying that sometimes, in our own head, we're comfortable with a certain area. And as a coach, we have to make that switch no matter what our client is comfortable with or not. And because it's for their good.
Yes.
Or why are we even spending time together?
Right. And that comes back to, when you're talking about commitment, sort of the twin brother or sister to commitment is responsibility, the willingness for the client to take responsibility. I think what happens in both of our cases is, rather than taking in both of our cases, let's just say how many of your viewers, possibly you, possibly me, have hired a personal trainer. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go see the personal trainer. He'll put me through my paces, and he or she will put me through my paces. And then I'll have this amazing physical body on the other side of it. But all of the other time that I'm not with the personal trainer, I'm just sort of not doing what they prescribed for me to do. Yeah. And then I'm wondering, and then why aren't things changing? Well, because I didn't take the responsibility for, this is my growth, this is my transformation, this is my health, and instead I was projecting it onto that person. Okay, give me the perfect plan, Bob, and then tell me how to work, but I kind of already know what I'm going to do. Well, there's no ownership in that. There's no responsibility in that. So coachability, commitment, responsibility, and where responsibility equals ownership really are kind of the driving forces here. If they are willing to do that, the value that they receive from you, the value that they receive from me is immense, because you and I are here to serve. We're here to serve each of our clients to the best of our ability, give them what they say that they want and they need. But it's a collaborative process. It's not a retail process. You don't walk into Best Buy and say, Bob, I'd like to have a retirement, please. That's not it. It's a collaborative process.
Yeah, exactly. So the last couple minutes that we have, Brian, why don't we, let me ask you this. So what are a few coaching tips that you would offer people that can use right away to change, and with that change, hopefully create some kind of improvement in their particular situation?
Sure. There's three that I can think of. One is what I refer to as the coaching math problem. And the coaching math problem for everyone who's watching or listening is V plus S equals P. Sort of Victor plus Sam equals polish. V plus S equals P. Well, what does that mean? A vision plus strategies equals a plan. So many of us say, I have a plan. No, we don't. We have a wish or we have a want. I really want to be
Mm.
a millionaire by the time I'm age 40 or whatever the thing is, whatever the fantasy is, but we don't have a true vision, and we certainly don't have strategies to back up those visions. So what's important in this equation is that you have to have both. You have to have a clear vision, and that's where Bob as a coach or Brian as a coach helps you to get really, really clear on what your vision is, and then actual strategies to go along with those. That creates the plan, and then you can execute the plan knowing that the plan is organic and it is going to change all over the place. But that's where having someone on your side, whether it's a trained coach like Bob or like me, or whether it's just having an accountability partner or the personal trainer or whomever that can help you in terms of accountability and in terms of action. So the first tip would be coaching math problem. B plus S equals P, vision plus strategies equals a plan. The second thing is find and hire an expert. I said earlier, if you were someone that needed to have surgery, you wouldn't let your general practitioner or your family doctor do the surgery. You'd go, okay, who's the surgeon? Who's the expert that's going to help me with this thing that I have to have done? Now, it's not life-threatening, but certainly, many of us have fears or concerns about how to grow our money, how to keep our money, how to plan for retirement, all of those things. And yet we've been, by virtue of our system, we've been sort of left to our own devices. Don't do that. Don't commit financial surgery yourself. Find an expert. Don't create a vision for, your life and your business yourself. You can start by yourself, but find an expert that can help you, that can guide you. And then the third thing is maybe you already have an expert. So maybe you already have a CPA. Maybe you already have a tax preparer. Maybe you have a financial planner. Evaluate your team. Constantly make sure that they're still a fit for who you are now versus when you hired them. I know so many people that they hired an expert 10, 15 years ago, but they've gone through, divorce, they've gone through health challenges, they've gone through life changes, and yet they're still working with the same people. That's not a bad thing in and of itself. Loyalty is a very noble concern, but at least evaluate whether it's still a fit for who you are now and where you're going. So that would be kind of the three tips that I would keep in mind. Vision plus strategies equals a plan. Find and hire experts for the things in your life, and then constantly evaluate who's on your team to make sure that they're still a fit for you.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian, and thank you to those that have attended this podcast, and hopefully this was helpful to you and understanding a little bit about some of the mindset and mind shift maybe as a business owner that you need to do. And let me remind everybody, as an asset coach and a tax strategist, my goal is for you to succeed. And that means whatever it means based on you and whoever's watching this or whoever I'm working with. There is no off-the-shelf plan. Like Brian had mentioned in our conversation, it's how are you doing? And then 60 minutes to 90 minutes later, we find out something. It's not silent. So that's the big thing here is I want to make sure that success and going through this process as an entrepreneur is tough. And it's very important to understand that there are other facets that are involved. And maybe it's really tough for you because you haven't taken this step. Maybe it would be a lot easier for you, create a lot less stress for you if you did invest in yourself, take action, hired somebody like Brian and or any other type of coach. Maybe your neighbor is a coach or somebody that you can at least take that first step with and have that initial conversation and do that. If you don't want to talk to somebody who give Brian a call, reach out to me, email me. I'll make the connection for the two of you guys, and let's have that conversation. So the goal is to succeed, because when you as a business owner succeed, the community succeeds, because your employees succeed, your customers succeed, the environment around you succeeds. And as social beings, as a community, we need to circle the wagons and we need to help each other in that success. And that makes it a lot more palatable and easier to reach whatever that goal and that attainment is. So once again, my name is Robert Wolf. I'm an asset coach and tax strategist, and I appreciate your time being here. Look forward to the next time that we get to connect. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.